Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're joined with Austin. Austin, previously the Executive Vice President of Atlantic Records UK. Austin, welcome.
Hey man, how you doing, Aaron?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. I do really appreciate you jumping on. If you wouldn't mind just starting off just a little bit of background about yourself and what it is you did at Atlantic Records.
Yeah, sure, man. So yeah, I've worked in music. This is my 20th year in the music industry, so I'm feeling like one of the elder statesmen now. But yeah, I've had a career working with and being lucky enough to work with some of the sort of most exciting and preeminent artists of our time. Started off my career in radio, and then moved over to streaming. So I think Spotify, Apple Music, and spent a number of years there working with some of the sort of best talent that the world's got to offer. And then for the last 5 years, I've been at Warner Music Group as vice president and president of Black Music at Atlantic Records. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey, and hopefully it will continue for a few more years yet.
Yeah, no, incredible. I'm very excited to have someone with your insights experience just to jump on here. The format of the podcast that we do is 8 questions that I've got. I'll sort of wrap them out so it's short, sweet, and just get some valuable insights. The first question is: with someone like yourself, with your fingers so close to the with your fingers so close on the pulse, what sort of trends are you seeing at the moment within the creator industry?
That's a really good way to start. I think the first trend I'm probably seeing is the decentralization of culture. Now, if you think about uh, sort of 10, 15 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, there were a handful of gatekeepers in terms of platforms and spaces, and they really controlled the pipeline, the pipeline to attention, the pipeline to accessing your fans. We're seeing more
Yeah,
and more decentralization of that. We're seeing more and more artists being able to build really successful careers, not just at a local level, but at a global level, by finding their audiences in non-traditional places, and finding their tribe in non-traditional places. So that's probably the first trend. And then the second trend is the continued globalization of art and creativity and collaboration. And that's something that us in the music industry have been speaking about for a number of years now, this kind of globalization, they're calling it. So kind of local talent, but with a global mindset. And it just amazes me sort of being on my sort of digital and the sort of physical nomadic journey and seeing Nigerian artists collaborating with Brazilian artists, collaborating with South Asian artists, collaborating with Australian artists. Like, these are relationships and fan bases that would have never interacted 10 years ago. And so they're probably the two trends that I'd say that I'm seeing the most of at the moment, or the things that excite me and interest me.
yeah. So more of a level playing field, and people getting the opportunities that they want to explore and sort of express in their own way. So
Definitely that.
yeah, just on that vein, then you've worked with huge artist creators. What is it that you would particularly look for in a person to bring them on board with yourself?
I'd say conviction. Like, you can teach and develop a sound. You can teach and develop a look. But if I think about the artists that have crossed over, broken through, and really made a global impact over the last 4 to 5 years, they're artists that have really known what they stand for and know what they stand for, and know who their audiences are, and know how to talk to their audiences. So for me, of course, you're looking for all of the standard things that anyone's looking for in any talent field, right? You're looking for someone who's
Yeah,
hardworking, who obviously has a level of skill in whatever the area is that you're looking at. In my case, it could be singing, it could be rapping, it could be dancing, etc. But conviction, man, I think conviction is going to be the key word for those artists that really, really want to win over the next coming years, especially in a world of AI driven content, especially in a world of 300,000 songs a day being uploaded on streaming services, unimaginable amount of music. Those people that have got real conviction are the ones that are going to cut through, man. So that's what, the artists that I meet that have that level of conviction are the ones that excite me.
yeah. It's that unwavering factor is just so attractive, isn't it? Like it's magnetized and it pulls you in. It really does. So both of them very positive things and positive insights you give, but it's never always positive and sweet sailing. Over the last 12 months, what would you say has been the biggest friction that you faced in your sort of business endeavors?
I mean, look, the music industry, every sort of 10-ish or so years, tends to have something that comes in and disrupts it. If you think of Piracy in the late 90s, early noughties, and then the move from Piracy into the MP3 era, and then the MP3 era into streaming, and people forget streaming was a disruptor when it first came through. You know, it's obviously now most people would say it's a net positive to the music industry, but when it first came through, there were a lot of people that were kind of very worried about, you know, what Spotify and Apple Music and other streaming services would do to the MP3 era. And it feels like with AI, we're at another crossroads, right? You can make a song at the touch of a button that sounds almost studio quality. I still feel like there's a difference when you hear an AI record to a record that was made solely kind of by a human or mainly by a human. But, you know, I was hearing this 50 Cent song the other day where they'd taken, you know, Many Men, or
Yeah,
one, I don't know if you heard it, the 50 Cent song, and then
yeah,
it,
yeah, yeah.
that sort of doo-wop, you know, 50s/60s Motown. It's incredible. That was done at the touch of a button. But it presents quite scary implications for the music industry. So that's definitely kind of one challenge I would say is kind of the rise of AI and how the music industry faces up and adapts to those challenges. And then in a post-pandemic world, you know, we're now a generation out of the pandemic, right? So you've got, you know, lots of generations who lived through the pandemic, but you've now got Generation Alpha that are in secondary school, and the pandemic and COVID is like this memory that they barely remember from when they were toddlers, right? You know, but these people, they've got GoHenry accounts, they've got Monzo accounts through their parents or older siblings, and they've got purchasing power. And if you think back to when we were kids, you didn't really have purchasing power till you were a teenager. But because of online banking and the rise of apps and the app store and stuff like that, young kids have now got purchasing power. I would argue that brands more and more are trying to find ways to target and get into those young people's minds from a much earlier age now, six,
Mm.
7, 8 years old. How does the music industry try to get those kids in early in an ethical way and in a way that makes sense? You know, that's definitely been, you know, a challenge as well. But it's exciting, man. All of these challenges are super exciting, and all things that sort of make me think to myself that over the next 5 years, you know, there is going to be some monumental changes in the way that people consume music, content, and all things kind of phone and screen related. And yeah, man, I'm here for the challenge.
It change is often scary, isn't it? But it's adapt or don't. You mentioned AI as a potentially scary thing, but is there anything that you're currently doing where you're harnessing it or you're trying to push away from it? What's your actual view on AI?
I'm a fan of AI. I think AI is a brilliant magnifier of productivity, but it for me it enhances creativity. It shouldn't be the genesis of
Mm.
creativity. You know, I think that's the way that I try to use AI. You know, AI can take a loose collection of my thoughts and organize them in a way that allows me to then fine tune it. You know, that's a brilliant use in my eyes of AI. I wouldn't use AI as the starting point to think for me, you know. I think that we've seen enough examples of AI hallucinating,
Yeah.
giving incorrect information, being confidently wrong, etc. You cannot rely on AI as a starting point, but it's an amazing magnifier of creativity, magnifier of productivity. And if I relate that to the music industry, you know, we've been using AI in music creation. You know, if you think about the average music creation process, there's an element of AI being used in sort of the software and plugins and tools that musicians and music makers use. But then it also helps with things like audience segmentation, you know, as we try to work out ways to identify and connect with audiences. You know, AI does a brilliant job in some cases of figuring out patterns and insights in terms of consumer behavior. AI
Mm.
can help us identify talent. I mentioned earlier that, you know, hundreds of thousands of songs are being uploaded every single day onto streaming services. That's new pieces of audio. It's a unmanageable number for even 1,000 humans to do all at once. You know, even if you had, I think I worked out the maths the other day and it was something crazy. Like you could have 50,000 humans like reviewing sort of new submissions, and that would still take hours and hours and hours every day, you know, to get through every single song. The maths on that might be a bit weird. I'll come back to you on that. But with that being said, I'll say that it's a overall it's a force for good, but how we just put guardrails to ensure kind of like safety of creativity, safety of IP, safety of people's livelihoods, you know, and to make sure that things like plagiarism is curtailed. All of that type of stuff is mad important as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible what the creativity and where it can push you to, but it's also it sort of hinders you in like the compliance aspect and whatnot. With the ever growing landscape of not just AI but tech and exposure online in the creative side in the industry, how do you think the industry is doing to play catch up with safeguarding? creators in terms of like online harassment, online stalking?
It's a really tricky one. I mean, I think they're doing well, but more can always be done. The problem is that you tend to have with, especially with things that happen online, is the Pandora's box opens, and then it then usually takes the government several years, in some cases decades, to respond to it from a legislation point of view, that then gives companies and organizations the power to stop some of this stuff happening, right? So
Yeah.
you look at the recent online safety bill, for example. That's brilliant, but that's something that could have come in literally 25 years ago. It's taken this amount of time for a particular government to finally put something in that safeguards young people from some of the more dangerous and disgusting content online.
Mm.
So most of the record labels that I've worked with in the past, and most of the media organizations that I've worked with or been a part of, have some processes in place around protecting talent, and that's sometimes direct liaison with the social media companies and other online platforms. That is having processes around taking offensive content down, or content that doesn't belong to other people down. And then, of course, in some cases, the authorities have to get involved because it gets a little bit more serious. Again, with the rise of AI, you can create a tool that can upload a million pieces of malicious content, right? You can just
Yeah.
press a button, a bad actor can press a button and then just leave their house, go for a coffee, while hundreds, if not thousands of videos are being pumped out online. So I do have some sympathy for these platforms and for the victims of these situations, because, back in the day, you might get a hate mail through the post. That was one letter by one person. You might give that to the authorities, they'll investigate it, and the person would hopefully get brought, you get brought to answer for their behavior. Now it's so faceless, it's so international. It could be a 13-year-old kid in Romania that's the bad actor in this situation. So it's tricky, man. It's really, there's not an easy solution to the problem. But from
Mm.
my opinion, from my viewpoint, sorry, it feels like the labels and the music industry is trying as much as they can, to solve the problem.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a never-ending and impossible task sometimes. Like you say, like a 13-year-old Romanian is a genius, has access to everything that everyone else has access to. If I was to pose a bit more of a hypothetical question to yourself, if time, money, sources are not a constraint, and I can click my fingers, wave a magic wand, and solve any big problem that you faced it within the creative music industry, what would that be?
I'd say access. Because talent is everywhere, but access isn't. And depending on what you're trying to do, sort of the postcode lottery of life might mean that your talent never gets an opportunity to shine. If you win the postcode lottery and you're born in W8 or you're born in WC postcodes of London, right next to King's Cross, where Sony Music and Universal are based, or W8, which is Kensington, where you've got another section of the music industry, including Warner. You've won the postcode lottery, right? You want to make music. You can literally go and hang out, in and around those offices all day, every day. If you've got any postcode, you were born in Newcastle or Cumbria, or, the depths of, Devon and the southwest of England, and you grew up in a lower socioeconomic background, which means that you can't afford the £100 train up to London, and you can't afford to rent a flat in London, and you can't afford to not work, etc., then it's really, really hard for you to allow your talent to shine. Of course, online has made that easier, but if I think of the majority of people that have found situations, it's by getting off their feet and pounding the streets and turning up to events and knocking on doors, etc. So definitely, man, I'd fix access, local talent hubs, pipelines, free travel for people to get to and from city to city and to collaborate, etc. Accommodation, if money was no object, then I'd fix
Mm.
access. I think that's the biggest. And I was super lucky, man. I grew up in South London, so it meant that at the point at which I wanted to work in the music industry, I could bunk the train, into London Bridge Station, hop the barriers and hang out outside the I've forgotten what they're called, maybe the London Studios, I think they were called. It's where like GMTV and all of those old school ITV shows were made. If I grew up in Liverpool, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I wouldn't have been able to go
Yeah,
just pop
yeah.
down in half an hour to the London Bridge Studios. So access, man, is so important.
That was poetic ending to that, mate. A postcode lottery of life. Which brings me on to the final question. If anyone wants to touch base with you, where can they go to? Where can they get hold of you?
try and find me, you know. I don't want to. I don't, in fact, no, don't actually. I don't want to get doxxed, but I just think it's LinkedIn, obviously LinkedIn. Just Austin Darbo at LinkedIn is the way to find me. And yeah, man, listen, I'm here for anyone who wants to reach out. Yeah,
Austin, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time today.
all good, man. Nice one, Aaron.